There are so many differing opinions when it comes to the 1000 Year Blood War arc. Some call it the greatest arc in all of Bleach, while others argue that it had a very anticlimactic finale, with some fans even arguing that we had finished the story arc knowing less than we did before. But one thing that nobody can dispute is that Kubo was at his creative peak during this final arc. We were introduced to a plethora of wacky and wild abilities that could rival even JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. For example, we had seen a giant sentient hand with the power to control and destroy things using just nerve power. We had also seen a biblically accurate angel that had mutated into a huge bird-like creature and then further into multiple bird-like creatures for unknown reasons. We also encountered a character similar to Thor, who just refused to die and had continued to get stronger the more damage that he had taken. The leader of the Quincy is essentially a fusion of Jesus Christ and an angry German dictator. And when it comes to the less entertaining spectrum of Sternritters, we even have Pepe, but the less that we talk about him the better, I think. Among this colourful cast of oddball Quincy, there was one character who manages to stand out. I'm of course talking about Mask the Masculine, the luchador who is accompanied by his sidekick James. He is in fact a pro wrestler whose powers grow from the cheers of his fans, or rather his singular fan. In this video, I'm going to be taking it upon myself to analyze and explain every aspect of Mask's Quincy ability called the Superstar. I'll cover the use case of this ability and why I think it works to its purpose within the larger narrative of the story. Before the video begins, only 12% of the people who watch my content are subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy these videos, then subscribe and stick around for more content just like this. Now let's get back to the topic of the video. Like with the other Quincy within the Bleach story, it all begins with their introduction during the first Quincy invasion of the Soul Society, where they had launched a surprise attack against the Gote 13, causing massive devastation. There were multiple casualties on the Soul Society side, including significant losses like Chojuro Sasakibe and Head Captain Yamamoto. This wild event serves as the primary introduction for the audience to some of these Sternritter and their respective schrifts. We get to see Pepe with the Love, Kangdu with his ability the Iron, Asnot's the Fear, and through the additional scenes of the anime, we catch a brief glimpse of Meninas's ability the Power. However, one Sternritter whose power that we didn't really see is Mask the Masculine's. Mask is present during the first invasion, but he doesn't reveal his power. And this isn't because he lacks screen time, but rather because he didn't really need to use it. Mask first appears within chapter 495 during the fight between Asnot and Byakuya. At this time, Renji had just arrived to stop Asnot from killing some Shinigami in the area. Renji had quickly engaged the invader in combat, only to realize that none of his attacks were effective because of a Quincy defensive ability called Blut Veen. While Renji was contemplating his next move, a massive figure attacks him from above, and this is none other than Mask the Masculine. Renji had managed to dodge the attack by jumping into the air, but Mask had quickly realigned himself for another strike, leaving Renji open to attack. However, Byakuya Zenbon Sakura had protected Renji by intercepting Mask before he could reach Renji. During the intense battle that had followed, Renji had tried his best to save his captain by activating his own Bankai, but before he could even utter the word Bankai, he was slammed from the side by a dropkick that had sent him flying across the Soul Society. This attack had come from Mask the Masculine, and it's unclear if Mask had used the power of the Superstar here to enhance his strength to the point that he could one-shot Renji, or if that was just his regular power. I would love to know what all of you think in terms of Mask's power scaling during this scene, but personally I believe that he was in fact cheered on by James here, and I'll explain why later on in the video. The first proper showcase of the Superstar occurs during the second invasion of the Quincy, which begins from chapter 560. Here, Mask is seen brutally attacking everyone's favorite punching bag and damage sponge Shuhei Hisagi. After connecting a devastating clothesline on Hisagi, Mask aims a downward stomp towards his head in order to finish him off. Fortunately enough, Kensei had intercepted the attack in one of the most coolest entrances during the story arc. Seeing Hisagi withstand such a beating and still survive supports what is later revealed about him during the Can't For Your Own World light novels. If you want to know more about Hisagi's newfound powers, including his Bankai, then I recommend you check out my standalone video where I discuss all of Hisagi's powers that are revealed from the can't for your own world light novels. At this point in the battle, this is where we begin to see what Mask is capable of. Kensei, who had arrived onto the battlefield with Rose, quickly activates his own Bankai and begins to fight the Sternritter. Mask leads with a powerful dropkick similar to the one that he had used against Renji during the first invasion. This had created a massive shockwave that travels across the Soul Society. However, it does little damage to Kensei, who casually blocks it and responds with a punch from his Tekken Tachikaze, which creates an even bigger shockwave. Kensei explains that his Bankai releases explosions within the bodies of his enemies infinitely, as long as their bodies remain in contact. He then sends Mask flying with another hit, and the two begin to discuss how weak Mask was. Hisagi, who had been lying on the ground, quickly draws their attention to the real threat, which isn't the Sternritter Mask but his sidekick James, who had started to cheer in support for the fallen Mask. Hisagi's observation implies that Mask had already enhanced his power using James's cheers during the fight, so we can logically deduce that Mask's power at its lowest would have struggled against a character of lieutenant class. Now, Hisagi isn't one of the weakest lieutenants, and it's plausible that he and Renji were on the same level before Renji's Royal Guard training. This would mean that when Byakuya had sank Mask down, he was in fact able to receive a power-up from James before he had returned to the surface. Now, this is what I believe had allowed him to take down Renji with that one dropkick. If Mask needed to use James to power up enough to defeat Hisagi, then it stands to reason that Hisagi was overpowering him at some point. Mask has only been shown to resort to using James's cheers when he is backed into a corner by his opponent. Now, returning to the fight, after Hisagi warns the two captains, they don't get a chance to respond as a fully rejuvenated Mask appears behind them and sends Kensei flying into a nearby building with a single swipe of his hand. He then explains that James's cheers are what gives him power. The nature of these power-ups is worth considering, as Mask starts at a level some might consider below lieutenant rank, but after receiving more power from James's cheering, Mask completely surpasses Hisagi's power level. Despite being utterly defeated by Kensei, Mask gets another power-up from James, which somehow elevates him from the level of a lieutenant to a captain rank level. Now, this is a significant power-up. Throughout the story of Bleach, it's made very clear that an inconceivable gap exists between captains and lieutenants of the Gotei 13. So much so that most captains can casually defeat lieutenants without even using their Shikai. Byakuya even states later on, when Hisagi falls under Pepe's control, that a single Kido blast from him would have been sufficient to have killed Hisagi. But with just one cheer from James, Mask crosses and even surpasses that chasm of power, proceeding to effortlessly defeat Captain Kensei. It is nothing short of astonishing to see how Kensei, who had once dominated Mask in their fight, could no longer keep up with his speed or even hurt him with his Bankai. The Sternritter utterly demolishes him with multiple devastating blows, snapping Kensei's arm like a twig and delivering a crushing chop to his head, and lastly finishing him off with a descending knee slam. Then Captain Rose turns up, and I know that I've given this character a hard time in some of my other videos on this channel, so instead of going over what happens to him, let's try a different approach. Rose's actions weren't as thoughtless as they might seem. For instance, Kensei himself explained what his Bankai did when he was pummeling Mask. The need for an explanation had served two purposes. One was so that the audience could understand what was happening, and secondly, because knowing how powerful Kensei's punches were wouldn't have made a difference for Mask, as Kensei was significantly stronger and faster than him at this point. So realistically, the explanation couldn't have caused any real harm. Now, the same applies for Rose, as he had no idea that Mask had a way to heal himself outside of his power enhancing ability, and he had gone on to explain this technique, not expecting that Mask would go to the extreme of destroying his own eardrums. In Rose's eyes, the battle was already decided. Covering his ears wouldn't have stopped the effects of Kinshara Butodan, so while it's a hilarious moment to poke fun at, the situation isn't as foolish as some portray it to be. Rose genuinely didn't expect that Mask could heal himself or go to such lengths in order to prevent the effects of his technique. The captain really was caught off guard by what he had witnessed, and Rose was then hit by Mask's beam. It may be a little bit unfair because of the amount of criticism that Rose receives for this very moment, but who am I kidding? It was absolutely hilarious to watch unfold. So eventually, Renji arrives onto the battlefield and saves Rose's life, and the rest is history. I've discussed this particular battle multiple times before, so instead I'd prefer to analyze how Mask uses the superstar in this fight. When Renji begins to overwhelm and overpower Mask, he relies on James's cheering to enhance his power to what he calls its peak, where he undergoes a wardrobe change with a new mask and costume appearing. And this is all before he activates his holy form. Now, this implies that despite the massive power growth that he experiences throughout the fight, there is a limit to the power that he can gain from James's cheering. This leads me to believe that James is a relatively weak character with an incredibly high power ceiling, and this creates an interesting limitation for his power. If he fights someone with murderous intent, he could be killed before he even gets a chance to power up. However, there is a small issue. Now, the small issue that I haven't addressed until now refers to James. Both of these beings are aspects of each other, so to successfully defeat Mask and James, it's necessary to kill both of them simultaneously. This is the only way to ensure the defeat of Mask. This means unless James is entirely vaporized, he'll survive any attack, which creates more instances of himself, thus allowing Mask to grow stronger as a result. This highly resilient nature and fluctuation in power is somewhat reminiscent of professional wrestlers, who can switch between being complete pushovers and absolute powerhouses, depending on how they are perceived by the audience. Kubo had taken this concept in its most archetypal form and had made Mask's strength directly dependent upon the cheers of his fans. But as if this power couldn't get any more stronger, it's revealed both within the manga and confirmed on Kubo's official fan club Club Outside that James is actually the real Sternritter, and Mask Demasculine is his ideal form that he is given shape to. So this ability always comes to mind when I think of how creative Kubo can be with his power-ups, and for good reason. This is a well-designed power that sets up Renji to take center stage for once, and in all honesty, Renji has been waiting for this moment for the longest time. I really do look forward to seeing how Taguchi and the rest of the anime team do justice to this fight during the second court of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. I hope that this video has helped you to understand the dynamic between Mask and James, and how the ability the superstar functions. I would love to know all of your thoughts, so definitely continue the discussion in the comments. Do you agree with me that the superstar is one of the most creative abilities that Kubo has introduced within Bleach? I look forward to reading all of your comments, and lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I can't wait to see you in my next Bleach Explained video. If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.